And welcome to the live Q&A with me, Professor Michael Scott. It's a pleasure to have you here on the 1st of July. I hope you're all feeling very, very summery, even if the weather hasn't quite cottoned on to the fact that it is now summer and we can expect and want some nicer weather to be outside, at least in the UK. I bet it's better weather wherever else in the world some of you may be watching, particularly if you are in Greece right now or in Italy or kind of in any other sunny Mediterranean clime. And we're all, of course, distinctly jealous of you, particularly here in the UK, as travel is still very, very difficult indeed. But kind of from those of you who are kind of in other parts of the world, do let us know, do shout out, tell us. We promise not to be too jealous. Let us know where you are listening from. Kelly says, it is raining in Tasmania. I am sorry to hear that, Kelly, indeed. But welcome, and thank you for joining us. From the ICS in London, Linda says, hello. Is it a raining outside in London? Is it a quiet ICS experience? How are you listening in the library, Linda, without annoying everyone else around you? Thank you so much indeed for tuning in. It's great to see you. And first off, I need to say a big thank you to you all for probably you've been thinking I've been extremely rude in that I've been ignoring the kind cards and letters that you have sent over the last couple of months through to my university address and the university department. Now, I have only just been able to pick up these cards dating back all the way to Christmas. So if you have sent through a card since, in the run up to Christmas, basically from any time from the end of November, through until, shall we say, about 2 weeks ago, if you sent a card or a letter, and that includes very kind things for Christmas, for my birthday, kind of messages from the community group, as well as letters, very, very kind letters and cards as well. Thank you. They have now finally been received. And what seems to have happened is, obviously, I wasn't going to the university very much from the end of November because we were all asked to work from home with COVID. But then when I did pop in March, the postal system had decided not yet to be operating, bringing stuff from the central post room to the individual departments because they weren't expecting people to be in. And then we had a massive deluge of posts suddenly arrive when they decided that the postal doors should be open again. And suddenly all this wonderful post arrived. So it was a great chance for me to open up and read all your messages. So thank you. And I am sorry that it has taken this long. Wow. Okay, Kelly's off to New Zealand. Don't leave now just because it's raining in Tasmania. Hello to Marija from Serbia. Thank you so much indeed for tuning in, and to all of you for tuning in around the world. It is, as ever, an enormous pleasure to have you with us this half hour. Now, we've had some absolutely fantastic questions that have come in. Have them as always, because you guys are amazing. But first off, I just have to talk to you very briefly about the topic we picked up in the last couple of Q&As, because it's really caught people's interest. Hello from Mexico, Jose. How are you doing? Ciao to Savannah. We're talking about painting of sculptures. So ancient sculptures we know were all brightly coloured, but someone brilliantly asked the question, do we know anything about the people who painted them? Who were they? Were they the same people who painted wall paintings? Were they the same people who painted vase paintings? And this got us all interested. And then thanks to Latifa, we got and did some investigation, particularly into Pliny's Natural Histories, where we heard about particular painters who worked with particular sculptors. And then, as if people around the world were picking up on the theme of painting of sculptures, I turned to a publication I hope you guys are all familiar with, the Omnibus magazine. So this is the school's classics magazine that is put together in particular by the Classical Association here in the UK, with a whole series of brilliant essays and articles that are really targeted and thinking about different classical topics, expanding and reaching out from the kind of school syllabus and introducing new kind of sorts of things that you might want to study and think about at degree level. And here we have, as one of the articles in the March 2021 issue, which I also picked up at the same time as your lovely cards, there is a interesting article about should we reconstruct Greek and Roman sculpture, and particularly its colour, by Amber Nanosh. Now, Amber is the Gladstone Prize winner. So this is the essay and article that Amber has written and actually won the Gladstone Prize with it, talking about the importance of remembering sculptures and indeed buildings with their colour. But what struck me most about this article was the depictions, because I've never seen them before. Now, if I hold this up to you nice and close, there we go. You get to see this. You can see what it is, I hope. It is a painter painting a statue head with a palette kind of in his hand. And what this is, it is a ring stone. Right, that actually dates from the 1st to the 3rd centuries AD. It's currently in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, but a small ring stone actually then depicting the process of painting, done in stunning detail. And then also accompanying Amber's article is another image, and I'm going to hold it up for you here. So this is an Apulian 4th century BCE vase painting of a painter painting a statue of someone you might recognise. It's Heracles. There you go. Hercules, Heracles. There you go. So there we have. So there's a whole feast of stuff out there that I wasn't aware of, from ringstones of the 1st centuries AD to a vase painting of the 4th century BCE, looking at when painters painted their sculptures. So we now can visualize what's going on as well as understand a little bit more about it. Thank you to all for contributing. Now let's get on with some serious questions here. Lee Edmond has been in touch, I suspect on behalf of his class, to say, do I have a view on whether it's right to stand on ancient mosaics or amongst hypocausts? It's a big issue, #HypocaustGate. Well, Lee, yes, I agree with you. This is a big issue. Is it right to stand on mosaics and ancient amongst hypocausts? Now, it depends very much whether or not this is a choice for you. Now, if you all want to reveal and admit if you've ever stood on an ancient mosaic or walked amongst an ancient hypocaust, we are all amongst friends here. We're not going to tell anyone. You can let us know in safety and we won't judge. Now, obviously, when you go to many ancient sites, there isn't really the chance to do this because often these areas are roped off so that you can look at them, but that you're not supposed to walk on them. Linda's already been touched with why you don't like standing on mosaics. And absolutely, we have a problem here in that if everyone goes and stands on these stones, over time, eventually, of course, they will be worn down and will be damaged. So, how do we manage this? Is it a way of, do we have to cover over the original with some kind of protective layer and then allow you to walk on that, but then you can't see them as well? Do we have to ask everyone to suddenly put on soft protective shoes when they go round a site? That's probably pretty impractical, not to mention not very hygienic, particularly in a COVID era. So in terms of practicality, the option probably is that we can't. But if you have been watching a TV programme or two that I've done in the past, you will notice, of course, that I have myself been standing on these things. And that is one of the joys, advantages and real kind of moments where you feel very, very privileged, because often, given it's a small team, you are given permission to move behind the ropes and to move through and walk on some of the ancient mosaics, hypocausts and floors, and through these buildings. Because in order to give that kind of real, authentic feel of a place and experience, you want to be in it, feeling it, touching it, rather than just pointing to it from behind a rope. And that is the kind of magic and wonder and kind of reality of TV. So there are exceptions, there are moments, but obviously they can only be, in certain ways, for people who kind of have special reason to be in there and be walking on this material. Now, of course, this doesn't apply to certain places. So we were talking about Epidavros, I think, last time as well, and thinking about healing sanctuaries. And there, of course, there is the great theatre of Epidavros that is open to the public all the time. And people are clambering all over the site. And particularly in the summer, it hosts the great ancient theatrical festival of Epidavros to this day, where they put on great ancient tragedies. And people are crawling all over the stonework which is itself being worn down as a result of that many people walking all over it, particularly by high heels. And indeed, also apparently they have a problem with people leaving their chewing gum on the seats, which I think is kind of crazy. So we have a sort of a weird thing where we're okay with this happening with certain types of floors and surfaces, marble, stone, where there isn't any kind of decoration, where it's just plain seating or plain flooring or plain architecture, like a theatre at Davros, but we're not necessarily okay with it when it's a mosaic floor or a more delicate floor. And so somewhere in there is probably the balance. Clive suggests bare feet, always good. Yes, I can see hundreds of thousands of tourists being asked to take off all their shoes, leave them at the door so that they can walk over the ancient mosaics. That might be the answer. So Lee, tell us what your students think as well. Should they be able to stand on an ancient mosaic and put themselves into a direct connection with the past or not? Mark Gannon has asked a question here. In the whole of Greek history, could you name 3 moments you personally would like to have witnessed? And now this is one of those great questions I'd like to throw back out to you guys. Let us know what you think. Are there 3 moments you personally would like to have witnessed from the ancient world, and particularly in Mark's case from ancient Greek history? For him, it would be watching the Spartans' last stand, presumably you mean at Thermopylae, seeing the beauty of Athens and of Delphi at their prime, and watching an artist creating all the wonderful works of art. Great question. Yes, so do send in your thoughts. What do you guys think? What would be your 3 top moments that you would like to witness and bear witness to? Now, it's an impossible list to choose from, isn't it? Kind of 3 moments you'd like to be a fly on the wall for. In some ways, I think I would like to choose 3 different kinds of moments. So one, definitely kind of political, military, strategic. So it might be when the night before the eve of the Battle of Salamis, for instance, when Themistocles is plotting to send a slave into the Persian camp to sort of lie to the Persian king that the Greeks are on their last legs, and so trick the Persian king to send his fleet into the Straits of Salamis. Be in the room when they're discussing that plan. That would be absolutely brilliant. So if there's a political kind of military strategic moment, that would be it. Creation-wise, what object would you like to be there when it was formulated, when it was brought into existence? It would have to be something like the burial mask of Agamemnon at Mycenae, when that was laid onto the face of the warrior that was buried there in Mycenaean times, to be there for that funeral. That would be amazing. Clive wants to watch the lighthouse of Alexandria fall. Kelly wants to see the creation of the Boxer. And then after that, it would probably be a key religious or athletic ceremony. I'd like to be in Olympic Games. I'd like to see an Olympic Games, not for some of the more dramatic stuff that I don't think we would take too kindly in any way, shape or form. Patrick would like to see the death of Alexander. That's another great one. Absolutely, indeed. Be there amongst the Olympic Games, because obviously, we know it's hot, we know it's dusty, we know there's 40,000 people crammed into the Olympics with all these animals that they're hanging around all week in the sun and the heat and the dust and the filth and everything else. Not a very pleasant experience. Don't forget, with the ancient Olympics, one of the most famous descriptions of it was, if you wanted to punish a slave, you sent him to the ancient Olympic Games. So not a pleasant experience, but a dramatic one. David, Athens under Pericles, Alexandria under the first Ptolemies. The first time a play of Euripides was performed. Yeah, absolutely brilliant to be in the theatre of Athens, theatre of Dionysus, when a production of a great tragedy, the first time Medea was put on, for instance. That would be brilliant. Tracy would like an audience with the Pythia at Delphi. What would you ask, Tracy? Kelly, anything in the theatre sounds brilliant. Linda, the Sphinx being built. Absolutely brilliant ideas. Love your question, Mark. Thank you so much indeed. Some great questions there. I wanted to take a moment away from the questions before we come back to lots more, to just make a note about some of the things that are happening in the news right now around and about. So you can see all of these, of course, on the Facebook page. We've put the links out, but from The Guardian, the Acropolis now, outrage. If you get a chance to go to Greece, or if you are in Greece, and you have a chance to go and have a look at the Acropolis, there has recently been some new concreting of the pathway that takes you from the Propylaea through up towards the Parthenon. And this has divided people massively. So those who think it's not gone far enough, and those who think it's covering up too much of the ancient reality. So there is absolute outrage and consternation about concrete on the Acropolis right now. From The Guardian as well, in Verona, in Italy, city I love very much, there is a miniature Pompeii that has been found beneath a former cinema. Discovery, it was in the basement of the Astra Cinema, and it's a magnificent frescoed wall that the building dates to the 2nd century. Evokes a miniature type of Pompeii. Brilliant characterization. Absolutely love that. But then, of course, we've also heard from ITV News that in Blenheim Palace, not far from me here in Oxford, they have found a guidebook that was written back in 1813 to 16 by Henry Hakewill, who was excavating the North Leigh Roman villa, and this is one of the earliest guidebooks to a Roman villa site that has just been rediscovered. So it's something that was written in a more recent past about the very ancient past, which was then lost and which has now been rediscovered as well, which I absolutely love. We keep remembering things that we have already thought and written and studied about the ancient world. I couldn't resist telling you this one as well from Atlas Obscura. In May, on a sunny day in May, a dozen people met in the Roman ruins of Troy in what is now Portugal with a recipe. Ooh, are they making poison? Are they making something to kind of concoct and take over and reenact some kind of fantastic Roman ritual? What's the ingredient list? Well, it's quite a list. 400 kilos of sardines, 150 kilos of sea salt, 350 litres of seawater. The group included archaeologists, nutritionists, paleontologists, ichthyologists, and of course a skilled chef, and probably some very, very big vats, containers and spatulas to be able to mix and mash all of this stuff. They had assembled to experimentally recreate, of course, garum, the ancient fish sauce of the Roman Empire, just as it was originally produced, and seemingly do it on quite some scale. 400 kilos of sardines and 150 kilos of sea salt is going to make quite a bit of garum, which I suspect they might find quite difficult to actually then give away to people and get rid of and actually use. But good on them. What a way to spend in May. Maybe they're selling it. Maybe it's available online. Let's have a check. See if you can buy a bottle of garum sauce made in Portugal back in May. What's on as well? There's lots going on over the next couple of weeks. If you fancy it, on the 8th of July next week, you can tune in to the Belfast Classics Summer School, which is going to be online. And I'm going to be giving a talk for them, introducing the students and for anyone else who'd like to join in. So you can just register via Eventbrite, and then you get a link to watch about the bigger ancient world, introducing one of my favourite texts, the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. And that is a famous 1st century AD text where a sailor recounts all the different ports that you can stop at in the Erythraean Sea, which is what we know today as the Indian Ocean, and particularly running along the west coast of India that all the Roman traders used to go to on a regular basis, and tells you what you can buy and sell in each of the ports and how it works. So come along, join us. That's at 4:15 on the 8th of December. There's lots of other things that we've been flagging on the Facebook page, but just a couple to bring to your attention. Also, we've got some podcasts out there on this theme of a bigger ancient world, ancient global history. History Hit podcast have a podcast about Berenice and the Red Sea spice route. So this is talking about the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. So Roman traders would actually sail from Egyptian ports like Berenice and Moyos Homos, and then the Red Sea, coast of the Red Sea, then sail down the Red Sea out into the Indian Ocean, and then across using the monsoon winds to get to the ports of India. And there's a great podcast with Professor Stephen Sidebotham from the University of Delaware, who's been absolutely fundamental to the excavation of Berenice. Absolutely fascinating site. Definitely have a listen to that. On BBC Radio 4, some of you might have been having a look at BBC Radio 4's programme on detoxifying the classics, presented by Catherine Harlow, who's coming in as the new director of the ICS, Linda, where you are sitting today. And that's really worth a listen to as well, thinking about the different ways in which classics has been misappropriated, and as a result has sort of gathered a whole sense of misconceptions around the subject, and what we're going to have to do to sort this out and sort of split it out apart and become more aware of classics and of its endless meanings and re-meanings. So that's definitely worth listening. And then, of course, some of you may have been taking part in the Warwick Classics Network A.G. Leventis Ancient Worlds Day that we had a week or two ago. And you can now listen to and watch the over 20 different videos that we've produced on a whole host of different topics, covering and particularly relating to the ancient history and classical civilization GCSE and A-level syllabus here in the UK. That includes a live talk by me about the Battle of Salamis and another live talk by a colleague, Dr. Elena Giusti, centering Africa in Greek and Roman literature, but alongside a huge range of other fantastic talks from different colleagues, all in the Warwick department. There's a real smorgasbord of fantastic stuff to listen into, so please do. And from our postgraduate community, we also have the Material Musings blog that you can see on the Warwick website. And this week, it's about a Roman cosmetic from Southwark. So this is an absolutely brilliant kind of survival of a cosmetic, and it's a blog talking about what this cosmetic market was like in the ancient Roman world. What were the stuff made of? What was people using it for? And that actually links in with a question that Sarah Scotty asked some time ago that I'm sorry I haven't been able to get to yet. Sarah's been reading Lara Maiklems' book Mudlarking, which she highly recommends, but she wants to talk about. She talks in the book about how some of her finds are deeply personal items belonging to someone lost in history. And Sarah would like to know kind of if we've made any similar finds ourselves, come across them. And this Material Musing blog really reminded me of this, because I remember vividly when we were doing a programme for ITV some years ago about Roman Britain from the air. I was co-presenting with Christine Bleakley, and we went to the Museum of London and we were looking behind the scenes in storerooms, the fantastic storerooms, of some of the things that had been found from Roman London. And that included, just like the Material Musings blog is talking about, cosmetic cream in a little tub. Now, this stuff is 2,000 years old, but when you opened up the lid, because the lid had been so well put on, and because it had been so well buried in anaerobic mud, when you took the lid off, the face cream was still there in the pot, and it was still soft to the touch if you were allowed to touch it. In fact, to the extent that it was almost possible to see a kind of fingerprint, thumbprint from where the person had last put their finger in to take some out. And that, for me, was one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen. That idea of complete connection to an object that was so personal, that had been dropped who knows why, who knows where, who knows by whom. We can never get any closer to the individual themselves. But the fact that this object was still in such good condition 2,000 years on, that absolutely blew me away. So Sarah, thank you so much for your question. And the other kind of thing that I think that I'm always fascinated by and feel kind of is really a close connector to very personal ancient stories is when you go to Greece and you go to religious sanctuaries and you look, you'll never see them really on display in the museum because they don't amount to much, they don't look much. They tend to end up in boxes in storerooms because A, there's lots of them, B, they're very old, and C, they don't look particularly great on display. But in the kind of original or origin centuries of the Greek sanctuaries of the Archaic and Classical period. So what am I talking about? We're talking about the 8th and 7th into the early 6th centuries BCE. This was the period when suddenly Greek sanctuaries took off and started monumentalizing and really being visited and lots of stuff being dedicated in them. Communities were coming together again in the 8th century BCE onwards, and they were starting to invest in their religious sanctuaries. But one of the things that we see in this period, particularly being dedicated by women, are hairpins and brooches. Now, the humble hairpin, and it's this idea of offering a dedication not because it's extremely valuable or extremely expensive, or that you've had it created for just the opportunity to donate it and dedicate it to the god. Actually, what you're doing is giving something very humble, but very personal and very kind of close, that has been close to you. You're wanting to leave a little bit of yourself, in a way, in the sanctuary with the god, and you're imagining that the gods have use for and can appreciate the same kinds of objects that you appreciate and use in your everyday. And I just love this idea of Greek community forming, coming together, deciding to invest in its sanctuaries, it becoming more of a habit for people from these communities to go and dedicate things to the gods, and imagining these people imagining kind of like, I'm sure the goddess being worshipped here, or indeed the god, needs a hairpin, wants a hairpin, can appreciate a good hairpin, so I'm going to offer the god and goddess my hairpin as a token of my appreciation. I can't afford a statue, I can't afford a gigantic temple, I can't afford to dedicate a great building, but I can afford to leave a little something here permanently in the sanctuary, which is also from me. And that's the kind of image that I really, really, really like as well. So Sarah, thank you for that question. Absolutely brilliant indeed. We have a time for one or two other questions. So Antonius Gunavos was also asking a week or so ago. So please accept my apologies for getting back to you late with an answer. Is there such a thing as a Hellenistic Britain? So, Hellenistic world is the period between, of course, the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BCE, all the way through to the victory of Augustus at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. And that's the Hellenistic world. And it's named that because it's the time in which the Greek world, expanded by Alexander the Great, is governed by the great Hellenistic rulers of the different empires that Alexander's empire is then split into. But what's going on in Britain in this time? Do we talk about a Hellenistic Britain? No, we don't. We don't at all talk about Hellenistic Britain. Really, the Hellenistic world is confined to Greece and then to the Eastern Mediterranean and through what is today modern-day Turkey, ancient Asia Minor, through to what is now Central Asia and modern-day Afghanistan and down to the shores of India. If we go west out of the sort of sphere of the Greek world, and particularly to Britain, we're in what we would term the Iron Age, Britain's Iron Age. So this was a time of druids and sort of building up to the period when Britain would come into contact with continental Europe in terms of trade, and then, of course, be drawn into the sphere of the Roman world from the 1st century BCE. Now, we do know people in the Hellenistic period, or just at the very beginning of the Hellenistic period, who went to Britain. We know of the great traveller Pytheas, who lived in Marseille, ancient Massalia, and he set out west at around about the same time that Alexander the Great set out east to do a circumvention. He sailed around the whole of Britain and then went as far north, getting into the Arctic Circle, and where the water starts turning to ice, and he records seeing kind of water flows turning into ice. But he stopped off in Britain in Cornwall, where there were great tin mines. So already clearly by this stage there was something known about what was going on in Britain, and there was connection and trading going on, and that would build up so that by the 2nd century BCE we have archaeological evidence for in south and central Britain, so in the area that will become Londinium, London, having a regular trade going on, particularly with the Belgic tribes of Northern Gaul, modern-day France. And that, of course, so that's how Rome and the Roman world actually initially gets interested in Britain, because it's already, prior to the Roman invasion, such a massive and major trading partner that it must be worth investigating, and, of course, in the Roman way of doing things, conquering as well. So kind of thank you so much indeed for your questions, Antonio. So you were talking about both, is there a Hellenistic Britain, but also are there any connections between these worlds before the Roman conquest? Yes, absolutely there are, and it's really because of those connections that actually Britain ends up being kind of folded into, if you like, the Roman world. Now, we've got time for possibly one more question. Oh, Anna, you're sweet. Anna Leva or Lava, I'm sorry, I apologise if I've mispronounced your name. You very sweetly say, I've lost a lot of weight since filming Italy's Invisible Cities. Thank you very much. Yeah, I have actually, although I'm not quite sure if during lockdown I haven't put it back on. Someone said the other day that people have come out of lockdown in the UK in one of three ways. They've come out as chunk, hunk or drunk, and kind of, I fear it might be the first one for me. But your question, Anna, linking to that is, was there a diet industry in the ancient world? And were chubby people or thin people kind of preferred? What was the kind of preferred way of doing things? Enjoy Wimbledon. Kelly, thank you very much indeed for tuning in from Tasmania. Hope the rain stops soon. So this is a really interesting question asking about the diet industry of the ancient world and how did people view being fat or thin? And it's kind of, we kind of assume, don't we, this kind of prevalence and desire for thinness that we have in the modern world, although that is not actually the case for all parts of the modern world in any way, shape or form. Different cultures and different countries around the modern world actually tend to, on occasion, reject that kind of Western thin is better model. And it was more complicated than we imagine back in the Roman world. So what you had, on the one hand, were images of excess, right? If kind of people think about Roman dinner parties, you might come up with the idea of the vomitorium, where Roman diners were encouraged to eat as much as possible, then go and make themselves sick in the vomitorium so that they had space in their stomachs to eat more. And so that gives you an idea of excess is good, isn't it? Kind of filling yourself up to the absolute brim is good. And we do get that impression from a number of the ancient sources. But on the other hand, what that seems to be speaking to is actually a play on exaggerated behavior as a model of what not to do. So really, it's bad people, bad role models that you see doing this. So Suetonius writes about it a lot in the Lives of Emperors, that he doesn't want you to admire and follow, where these emperors will go and vomit up their food so that they can eat more. This idea of excessive consumption as a sign, actually, of inner moral decrepitude and laxity, right? You do that kind of eating if you haven't got moral upstanding courage. And we can see this in kind of Petronius's Satyricon as well, as another great text where this kind of nouveau riche, completely over the top, ridiculous character, of course he's the sort of person who's overeating in every way, shape or form. So quite a complex relationship with eating too much, eating to excess within the ancient Roman world. And then, of course, thinking back and putting ourselves in the Greek world, we might want to think about the fact that many citizens of different ancient Greek city-states had to simultaneously be the army of that city-state. And so one of your duties as a citizen was to maintain your physical fitness and physical ability to be able to fight on behalf of your state. And so that influences hugely as well kind of how you are supposed to behave vis-a-vis food. The other thing, of course, that does that is what is the availability of food, right? And we have to imagine that the ancient Greek diet in particular, quite meat low, meat deficient, probably only getting meat at religious ceremonies unless they were extremely wealthy, highly cereal based, so kind of trying to get a lot of calories from a mainly vegetarian diet. And so actually kind of, and given the hard physical labor, how much would people have the opportunity to get chubby? Probably not that much, unless they were one of a very select few. Right, well, on that note, we are out of time and we have to leave it until next time. But thank you so much indeed, again, for your letters and cards. Thank you for your fantastic questions. We are going to meet next time on the 15th of July at 5 p.m. 15th of July, so in 2 weeks at 5 p.m. Hopefully the sunny shine will have returned by then, and we can carry on looking at some of your fantastic questions. In the meantime, do keep sending them in to the Facebook page or via